Did you know that the most powerful man Rome ever produced was assassinated by the very people he trusted most? Julius Caesar was not brought down by an enemy army, he was not defeated in battle, and he was not betrayed by the people who adored him. He was torn apart by senators he had forgiven, promoted, and called friends. And the detail that makes this story even more unsettling is that Caesar knew the danger. He had been warned, and yet he still walked toward the Senate on that March 15th as if fate were unavoidable. What makes a man who conquered Gaul, won civil wars, and doubled the territory of Rome simply ignore the signs of his own death? Caesar's story is often told as a biography of military glory, and those glories are real and they are extraordinary. But what is rarely explained is that Caesar's true genius was not in the battles he won, but in the invisible political moves he made before each of them. He understood something that very few leaders in history have truly grasped. Real power is not won through brute force, but through narrative, alliances, and perfect timing. And that knowledge, forged more than 2,000 years ago, is surprisingly relevant to the world we live in today. In this video, you will understand not only who Caesar was, but why he still matters. You will discover how a young man drowning in debt and lacking great wealth built the greatest empire of personal power Rome had ever seen, what fatal mistakes even his brilliance could not overcome, and what his journey reveals about leadership, ambition, and the limits of power. If you have ever wondered what separates the great leaders of history from those who simply disappear within it, you are in the right place, and the answer begins now. Rome, long before Caesar stepped onto the center stage of history, was already cracking from within. The Republic looked sophisticated on paper, consuls, a senate, popular assemblies, but the larger Rome grew, the harder it became to keep the system functioning. The wealth from Rome's conquests did not reach everyone. It accumulated in the hands of an aristocratic elite, while soldiers who had dedicated years to military service returned home without land and without prospects. These men became completely dependent on the generals who commanded them, and that was the spark in a barrel of gunpowder. When a soldier owes his survival to his general rather than to the state, loyalty changes its address, and the Republic begins to lose control of its own army. Caesar was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was born with something far more valuable, a sharp mind and an ambition too large to be contained. Coming from an ancient patrician family, but without great wealth, he understood early on that he would have to build his own path. His oratory could make any senator shift uncomfortably in his seat, and his charisma worked like a magnet. What few people know is that at the beginning of his career, Caesar was literally drowning in debt, yet he used it strategically, turning creditors into political allies. It was with this same intelligence that Caesar recognized in 60 BC an opportunity others could not see. He brought himself closer to Pompey, the most respected general in Rome, and Crassus, the richest man in the Republic, forging what became known as the First Triumvirate. Caesar provided popular support, Pompey brought military prestige, and Crassus contributed the money. The result of this equation gave Caesar exactly what he desperately needed, the governorship of Gaul, a vast territory that was still waiting to be conquered. For 8 years, between 58 and 50 BC, Caesar led military campaigns with a precision that bordered on the impossible. His strategy was clear: divide enemy tribes against one another, build infrastructure at astonishing speed, and maintain his legions with extreme discipline. But Caesar understood that winning battles was not enough. He needed Rome to hear about every victory. That is why he wrote the Commentari de Bello Gallico, an account that reached directly into the hands of the Roman people, portraying him as a civilizing hero. It was pure and brilliant propaganda. He returned from Gaul with wealth, fame, and a devoted army. Meanwhile, the Senate, which had bet that Gaul would consume him, watched the plan backfire in spectacular fashion. The Senate, terrified by the power Caesar had accumulated, issued an order that seemed simple on paper: disband your army and return to Rome as an ordinary citizen. In practice, it was a political death sentence. On a night in January of 49 BC, Caesar stopped before the Rubicon River, the legal boundary between Gaul and Roman Italy. Crossing it with armed troops was, by law, an act of treason and a declaration of civil war. Caesar hesitated, weighing every consequence, and then spoke the words that would echo through the centuries: Alea iacta est, the die is cast. The next morning, Rome awoke knowing that civil war was now inevitable. Caesar won the civil war, defeated Pompey, and then surprised Rome with something unexpected. He pardoned his enemies. Each rival he forgave publicly became an ally, and Caesar's image grew as that of a magnanimous leader. With his opponents eliminated, he was appointed dictator for life and implemented deep reforms, reorganizing the calendar, redistributing land to veterans, and restructuring the debts that were suffocating the population. But every reform concentrated more power in the hands of a single man. And that was when Caesar touched the deepest wound in Rome. Since 509 BC, when King Tarquin was expelled from the city, the word king had been the greatest insult in the Roman vocabulary. Caesar began wearing purple robes, sitting on a golden throne, and receiving honors that bordered on the divine. The Senate, which had already swallowed the idea of a perpetual dictatorship with difficulty, now saw its own irrelevance becoming official. And when fear reaches that level in a room filled with powerful and desperate men, the consequences rarely remain confined to words. The conspiracy was born in the silence behind the scenes, fueled by months of fear and resentment. Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus led around 60 senators who called themselves the Liberatores, the liberators of the Republic. The irony is that Brutus was one of the men Caesar trusted most, someone who had been forgiven and promoted by the dictator himself. On March 15, 44 BC, Caesar went to the Senate despite the warnings. Inside, the conspirators approached under the pretense of presenting a petition, and then they drew their daggers. Caesar was stabbed 23 times. His death did not restore the Republic, it buried it for good. The vacuum left by Caesar triggered another civil war, from which his adopted heir Augustus emerged, the first Roman emperor. The historical paradox is unsettling. The men who assassinated Caesar to save the Republic became the very ones most responsible for its final destruction. And the empire that rose from those ruins endured for another 5 centuries, shaping Western civilization in ways we still feel today. The month of July bears his name. The calendar that organizes your life derives directly from the Julian calendar. The title Caesar became synonymous with emperor in nearly every European language. The Germans called it Kaiser, the Russians Tsar. Caesar is quite literally embedded in the very structure of time that we all use. The story of Julius Caesar is not just a distant chapter from a dusty history book, it is a mirror that reflects uncomfortable truths about ambition, power, loyalty, and the limits that no man, no matter how brilliant, can overcome alone. You have just traveled through 2,000 years of history in a matter of minutes, and if you absorbed everything that was said here, you are leaving this video seeing the world a little differently. Because truly understanding Caesar is not just about knowing who he was, it is about understanding the invisible mechanisms that still move power, politics, and human relationships today. Now, a direct question for you. Looking at everything Caesar built and destroyed, Do you think he was the greatest leader Rome ever produced, or the greatest mistake the Republic made by allowing him to rise so far? Was his fall inevitable, or was there a moment when he could have acted differently and changed the course of history? And, more importantly, what decisions in your own life have you been postponing because you were afraid to cross your own personal Rubicon? Leave your answer here in the comments. This conversation is too good to keep just between you and the screen. If this video added something to your life, if you learned even one thing you did not know before, then every second was worth it. And remember, this is only the beginning. There is still so much more of the Roman Empire to explore. Emperors who changed the world, battles that reshaped civilizations, and stories that official history almost forgot. If you want to continue this journey, subscribe to the channel now and turn on the notification bell, because the next video is coming and you won't want to miss it.